To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.
Hello my dear grade 9 students. So today we are about to discuss the final lesson in your grade 9 science syllabus. So this lesson is going to reflect about the sustainable use of natural resources. Sustainable use of natural resources. So this is the 19th lesson in your grade 9 science syllabus, my dear children. Right? So what are the things which are referred as natural resources? So natural resources are the things, my dear children, which are occurring naturally, right? That gives us something. Something means actually in here that are beneficial for us in our day-to-day life and as well as in industrial lives and also in other different cases. But however, these things should be natural. Okay, so that's why these things are referred to as natural resources. Okay, so naturally occurring beneficial things to us can be simply referred as natural resources. So if you check our environment, my dear children, all the things in our environment, now each and everything in our environment, like for an example, we can take a house. So within a house, definitely you can observe some certain things which are created by natural resources. If you take a chair is made by using several cushion polymers. Then sometimes we use small bit of wire kind of things, right? So then after that we use iron nails, and most importantly, my dear children, we use wood. So we receive wood by the plants and trees. Plants and trees can be considered as natural resources, as these things are naturally occurring in our environment. So like that way, when you check any other substance, right, or any kind of an object in our environment, in order to build up these things, even though those things are made up artificially, in order to build up these things, we utilize certain natural resources, right? So plant and trees can be considered as a natural resource. Then, my dear children, water. So like that way, there are several things, right? So we'll be discussing about each of these things, special natural resources within this lesson part, and how we can use these things sustainably. Now, sustainable use means, my dear children, we have to use these resources, right, so that we can consume, or so that we have the ability to get these resources and also the users, and also it's our responsibility to protect these things and keep these things for the future generation as well, right? So sustainable development means, or sustainable use means, in simple, we have to conserve these things so that the future generation can also use. Okay, so that is what do you mean by sustainable use, my dear children. So sustainable use actually, right, the easiest meaning for the sustainable use is, right, here what we have to do is very simple. We have to use these resources economically, and we should not waste out these resources, right, and we should not excessively use these resources. So this is what do you mean by sustainable development in simple, right, or else sustainable use for these things in simple. Okay, so I hope that you got the idea about the natural resources and the sustainable use, my dear children. So let's head on to see what are the main topics that we are about to discuss within this lesson part then. So first of all, my dear children, we'll be getting an introduction for the lesson part. So when I was telling you about the 19th lesson in the previous slide, I told you like what are the things which are called as natural resources and what do you mean by the sustainable use. So we'll be discussing within the first lesson part under the introduction about these natural resources, and about the main types of natural resources that we can observe within our environment under a brief introduction part. Okay, then after that, my dear children, after the introduction of basic natural resources in our environment, we'll be learning about the main natural resources within our environment which are helpful for our life. So under that, we'll be learning about water first, right? Water. You know that water is very essential for the existence of organisms, right? Even when you take our body, more than 50% is made up with water, right? So water is quite important for each and every organism. All the metabolic activities that happens within our body, right, are water related activities, my dear children. So that's why even we can't survive without water. So for each and every metabolic activity which are going to occur within our body, my dear children, water is a quite essential component. Then, my dear children, when you take water, you know that oxygen and carbon dioxide and other types of gases are getting slightly dissolved within water. So therefore, it is acting as a living medium. So like that way, there are several, right, beneficial things when you consider water. So we'll be discussing about water in detail within the first lesson part regarding the first type of natural resource. Okay, then my dear children, we'll be learning about minerals and rocks and minerals. I think in grade 7, right, you have studied about certain things related to minerals and rocks. We studied about the rock cycle, and we studied about 3 types of rocks, and we studied about different kinds of minerals. So this is some kind of a continuation for that one. Okay, so we'll be learning under there, right, about several rocks and about several minerals, and especially a kind of a resource that is somewhat, unique to Sri Lanka, which are gems. Okay, so we'll be learning about all of these things within the minerals and rocks part. Then, my dear children, like I said when I was starting the lesson part, plants and trees can also be considered as, right, natural resources. So in the next one, we'll be learning about these plants. Then finally, my dear children, timber. So by using plants, the main resource that we get, right, the main resource that we, I can refer this thing as physical resource, as it is, like giving out certain physical things. I mean, physical things means we can use these timber to make out certain physical objects in our environment. Actually, not in our environment, right? We can say that in our household activities, we can use this timber in order to make out several, right, physical things. Okay, physical things like chairs, tables, and so on. Right? So, my dear children, these are the basic things that we are about to learn within this lesson part. Okay, so within this lesson, we'll be learning about the natural resources and how to use these things sustainably. So the natural resources that we have, or that we are going to discuss within this lesson part, are water, minerals and rocks, plants, and from plants, the timber that we get. Okay, or in simple, we can refer those things as wood. Right then, so now let's head on to see the introduction part related to the first and foremost topic. Okay, so you're given with a question in here. Let's see the question. Name several things that you can see in your classroom. Find out and tabulate the basic things that used to make them. Name several things that you can see in your classroom. So when you observe your classroom, what are the things which you can observe? Okay. So what you have to do is, you have to write down the basic things which can be used in making these each and every object in your classroom. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is, I'm going to take 3 such objects that you can observe within the classroom, my dear children, and I'm going to write down the things which those things are made of. Okay, basic things. So let's take a table first. Right. like this. We'll take a table first. And my dear children, within this table will include the object in here and basic things. So I'll be write down three such objects. Okay. Right. In order to give you a certain idea, I'll mention three of these. Right. So you know that within your classroom, my dear children, definitely you will find out several chairs and tables. So chairs and tables. So what are the basic things that we can find in chairs and tables? We can find iron, or we'll mention it as metals. Then my dear children, we can find wood. Then paints. Okay. And my dear children, we can find, we have mentioned as metals, no? So we'll over there we'll mention it as metallic. Okay, as there are basic things, we'll keep it like this. So metals, wood, paints, and what are the other things that we can observe within tables and chairs? Sometimes we can observe, my dear children, wax, or else in order to, cover up the spaces, smaller spaces, right? The carpenters apply a layer of wax or else glue, right? So we'll mention it as different chemicals, right? Different chemicals. Then, my dear children, what are the other objects that you can observe within your environment, right? We'll mention as stationary items, or else we'll make it simple even more. We'll write it down as pens, pencils, erasers, etc. Okay, etc. Means stationary items, right? So what are the things that we use to create out these stationary items like pencils, pens, erasers, and so on? We definitely use wood for pencils, then plastic in pens, then different kinds of chemicals. Then, my dear children, in pencils we use graphite. Right? In erasers we use rubber. Right? We use rubber. Then, my dear children, what else can you see in your environment, in your classroom? Right? So I'll mention another one. Buildings. When you observe, right? So they are mentioned in your classroom, right? So within classroom we won't be able to observe the buildings, no. However, within the school garden, then we can observe. But however, we are going out of the question, no. So you have to mention certain things in your classroom. So we'll mention a certain thing which can be observed within the classroom, right? So a cupboard. Then books. Okay. So we'll mention books for that stationery thing. It's good, no? books. Right. Okay, so cupboards and other kinds of documents. Cupboards and documents. So sometimes cupboards are made up with wood, sometimes with metals, right? Sometimes they are made up with wood, sometimes with metals. Then we can observe paints, right? Different kinds of paints can be observed. So these are the materials, these are several objects actually, my dear children, which you can observe within the environment, within your classroom actually. So we can observe chairs and tables. So things that we basic things that we can observe within these chairs and tables are metals, wood, paints and different kinds of chemicals which are applied on the surfaces, right? Then my dear children, pens, pencils, erasers, books, kinds of stationery items, right? Definitely you can observe these things in your classroom, right? So those things are made up with wood, plastic, different kinds of chemicals and graphite for sure and rubber, right? We use these kinds of things to create stationery items. Then cupboards and some documents. So we use in here wood, metals, paints, right? And my dear children, when you are preparing documents, you know that we use trees also, right? We'll mention as parts of plants, like, leaves, fibers, in making paper, my dear children, right? So we'll mention as in paper. Right, so these are several things that we can observe within the classroom environment. And my dear children, the things that we utilize in making these things, right? These are basic things, very basic things. So in here, chairs and tables, once again we use metals, good paints and chemicals. Then like when making stationery, wood, plastic, chemicals, graphite and all the other stuff. Then cupboards and documents, in making cupboards and documents we use wood, plastic, paints, part of plants like in paper, right, leaves and fibers. So these are several things, objects and the basic things which used to make these objects. Okay, so my dear children, by looking at the table, you can clearly observe there are some certain materials which are naturally occurring in our environment out of these basic things. So let me underline these things for you guys. So wood, metals, right? Paints and chemicals are also being prepared by humans by utilizing these things. But however, we'll underline the things which directly occur naturally in our environment. Okay. So once again, graphite, rubber, right? And my dear children, here parts of plants. I mean, like all of those things are plants, no? So leaves and fibers, these things. All of these things are natural things, naturally occurring things, my dear children, right? Which means all of these things belongs to the category called natural resources, as these things are naturally occurring substances, right? So now let's head on to see the next one then. So compare the table you made with the table given in here. Okay, let's see. Wall, bricks, cement and lime, table and chairs, timber and iron. Okay. We have mentioned it as wood and metals, right? Can you remember? So it is going to be same. You can see it very clearly. Then pens, plastic, metal and ink. So for ink, we mentioned that thing as, can you remember? We mentioned that thing as chemicals, right? Then my dear children, pencils, wood and graphite. books, paper, bags, cloth, metal and plastic. Then water bottles, glass and plastic. So these are several things that we can observe within the environment, within the classroom environment, and the basic things that they consist of. Okay, so we have prepared a table, and here also you are given with a table, my dear children, to compare the things which you have collected, right? So by looking at these tables, right, by looking at these tables, you can clearly identify the natural resources, right? Okay, so here it is given, find out the natural substances that were based to make the things in the classroom. Now we need to find out the natural substances which used to make these things, right? So we'll write down those three once again, and we'll mention only the natural resources that we utilize in making those things. Okay, so once again I'm going to use a table in here, right? Then once again I'm going to use that three particular things which I have mentioned earlier. So I'm going to use those three particular things, my dear children, which I have used earlier within this table. Okay, right. First of all, we'll draw out the table. So object, right, natural substances, right? So the object first, we'll use pens and pencils. Pens and pencils, what are the natural substances in it? So in pencils we know that graphite is there. Graphite is naturally occurring substance. Then my dear children, wood. And in pens, you know, there are metallic parts, like the ball point is made up with a metal part, right? So metals. Then books. So in making books we use plant fibers. Plant fibers, right? In papers, you know, we use, like the plant fibers are the ones which utilized in making books, right? Then tables and chairs. Tables and chairs. So to make tables and chairs, we use wood or else timber and metals. Metals are naturally occurring substances. Actually, we dig the earth in order to extract the metals from metallic ores. So within our planet Earth, like within the earth crust, my dear children, right, metals are found. So we have to dig up those things and we have to extract the metal out of the metal ore to get the particular metal. For a certain example, iron. Iron is obtained from a certain metallic ionic ore, iron ore, which is called as hematite, right? Hematite. Hematite is found within our soil, right? Within our natural soil. So we have to dig up the area which contain hematite. Then we have to heat it up to a higher temperature. Then by using different other kinds of chemicals, we extract the metal, which is iron, from the hematite. Okay. So that's how we receive metal iron. In the same way, my dear children, all the other metals can be extracted from the earth crust. Earth crust contains large amount of metals, different metals like aluminium, magnesium, right? Then iron, mercury, all of these things can be observed within the earth crust. However, they are making several components or several compounds. So we have to extract the particular metal from the compounds. Okay? Right. Then, my dear children, walls. Right? Walls and other constructions. Walls and other constructions can be seen. No? So in making these things, we use cement. Then bricks, right? So cement, I'll erase cement because you know that cement is not a natural substance, right? However, cement is made up with natural substances. I mean, we utilize natural substances in making cement, but however, cement cannot be taken as a natural substance. No, it's artificial made. So I'll erase it. However, certain sand, certain types of sand and minerals, these things can be observed, right? And also, my dear children, we utilize water in making cement mixtures, right? Water. Then, my dear children, clay in making bricks, right? Clay is directly found from the earth crust. So, these are the things which we can observe as natural substances within the objects which I have mentioned at my left hand side. So, pens and pencils, in making pens and pencils, we use these natural substances like wood, metal and graphite. Then in making books, we use plant fibers. Then in making tables and chairs, we use wood and metals. Then in walls and other constructions, sand, minerals, water and clay. We use these things. So all of these things are natural substances, my dear children. All of these things are naturally occurring substances which are beneficial to us, right? So now I think that you got the idea about natural substances quite well. What do you mean by natural substance, right? And how to identify these natural substances in our usual objects that we can observe in our day-to-day environment, right? Okay then. Tabulate your findings and compare your table with the given then. Okay, so they have given several things in here. Let's see. Substances, bricks. So to make bricks, we use clay and water. To make lime, we use limestone. To make cement, we use limestone, clay and gypsum. Then to make timber, wood, we use plants. In making iron, we use iron ore. In plastic, petroleum, that means mineral oil. In paper, plant fibers. In clothes, plant materials and petroleum. In glass, silica sand, that means minerals. So we have mentioned these things in simpler form in the previous slide, my dear children, right? So all of these things now given in under the right hand side. All of these things are, my dear children, what? Natural resources. Because you know that clay, water, limestone, then plants, iron ore, which is iron ore means, my dear children, that is the substance that we get iron from, the iron ore, right? Hematite, can you remember? I told you in the previous slide, right? So petroleum, once again we dig up the earth to get petroleum, right? Then plant fibers, then plant materials, then silica sand, like minerals, different kinds of minerals. All of these things are naturally occurring substances within our planet Earth. So all of these substances can be considered as natural substances, right? Natural resources. Okay, natural resources. As you can see here, we use several natural resources in making different substances, objects, which are much usable for our day-to-day life activities. Okay, so these are those kinds of substances and objects. So in here, given a point, study well the things given in the second column of the table. Those are known as natural resources. So these are the ones which are known as natural resources, as we can observe these things naturally in our environment, right? Without the mediation of the man. Without the mediation of the man, these things are naturally occurring in our environment. Okay, right then. So natural resources are the substances generated naturally without the influence of human activities. So like I said, natural resources are the things which generated in our environment naturally without the mediation of man, or without the influence of man. So there are several basic natural substances or natural resources that we can observe, right? So there are some basic natural resources. So we'll mention the basic natural resources that we are about to discuss within this lesson part, right? So what are those? Water. Then, my dear children, rocks and minerals. Rocks and minerals. Then plants, right? Plants and trees. Then finally timber or wood. Right. So these are several basic natural resources that we can observe within the objects that we have discussed earlier. So all of these, my dear children, right? All of these will be discussing within this lesson part. Okay. So you are given with a point here. The conservation of water for the future generation while we are using water today is known as sustainable utilization of water. Now let us find out about these resources in detail. Right. So water, that's the first and foremost natural resource, no? So like I said within the start of the lesson, my dear children, if you take any kind of a natural substance or natural resource, in here they have given water. So conserving of this natural resource or conserving of this water for future generation while we are using water today. So we have to use it for today as well, right? For our day-to-day needs and for our different activities, we have to utilize this natural resource, and also we have to conserve it. We should have to conserve it so that we can use it in the future as well, right? Not for us, but for the future generation which is coming. For those guys also, these things are very important, no? So therefore we have to conserve these things so that we can donate these things to the next generation. It's our responsibility. So not only for water, right, but for each and every substance, each and every natural substance, we should have to follow up the same thing, right? So that is, what do you mean by the sustainable use, right? Sustainable use. So now we are going to identify each and every component, right, which I have mentioned over here under the natural resources. So let's go ahead with the water first. So water, right? So here it is given, man cannot live without air more than few minutes. Further, he cannot survive without water more than a week. Thus, the second most important resource on the earth is water. So you know that without oxygen, we won't be able to live within our environment. So you know that water is also very important, right? It's very important for our life. when I was starting the lesson, I told you that each and every metabolic activity which is happening within our body utilize water. For metabolic activities, water is very important, my dear children. Right? Water is very important. So therefore, we considered that the second most important thing for the survival of life is earth. Right? Without air, like we can't live. Without air, we can't live like hours. Right? We will be able to live only few minutes without air. Oxygen is very important because for respiration oxygen is quite important. Respiration is the process which creates the energy which is needed for each and every, right, which is needed for each and every metabolic activity that is going to happen within our body. It's the process which creates the energy for those things. So if there is no energy, then we won't be able to survive. So that's why air is the first and foremost component which is essential for the life. In air means actually oxygen, right? Then the second most important thing is water. Because each and every metabolic activity within our body utilize some amount of water. I mean, they happen within the watery medium, right? Like the excretion, digestion, and so on, right? All of these activities, all of these things or metabolic reactions which occur within our body use water. Without water, right, these metabolic activities or metabolic reactions will not occur. So therefore, my dear children, water is very important for our survival. So we consider water as the second most important substance, right? So here, the base of life on the earth is water. When finding life on other planets, scientists find whether there is water on them. The reason for this is that the life we know is based on water. So like I said, my dear children, the life that we know, actually what is the meaning of life, my dear children? How can you define a life? I mean, like, how can you define a certain organism has life or not? How can you define whether a certain organism or whether a certain thing is living or not? Actually, what we define life, right? How can we define life? I'm asking, how can we define life? So basically, scientists have defined life by using several, right, metabolic activities that they do. I mean, like, all the living organisms, they respire and they get nutrition. They respond to a certain thing in the environment and they show movements and so on, right? So all of these activities are referred to as metabolic activities. So most of the metabolic activities that we do in our day-to-day life are we are doing those things by utilizing water, right? So life means, my dear children, we are going to do several kinds of special things, right, by utilizing certain substances within the environment. So these special things that we carry out in the process of life cycles, right, are called as metabolic activities. So if a certain thing is showing these metabolic activities, then we can say that this person or this thing is living. So if you take this pen is not showing any kind of those metabolic activities like respiration, nutrition, and so on. So we have learned these things up to a certain extent in grade 6 and 7, right? So this is how you define the life in scientific terms, right? In scientific terms, this is how you define life. So each and every metabolic activity which I have mentioned previously, water is a very important substance. So our whole life, my dear children, is water based. We utilize the water within each and every, right, within each and every component in our body. If you take our brain and heart, within our brain and heart, more than 50% there is water. Within our blood, you know that there is more than 50% water. If you take our tissues, right? If you take our muscles, more than 50% you can once again observe water. If you observe our bones are quite tough, no? Right? So you might think that those things are made up with only solid substances. Not at all. At least 30% contains water within those bones. Your fingernails, right? Your whole skeleton contains some amount of water, right? Like up to 30% of these substances contains water. Okay, my dear children. So we are like aquatic animals who are living in terrestrial environments. All of the components within our body contains water. And all of these components, right, are utilizing water in order to keep you guys healthy and living. Right? So water is a very important thing for the survival of organisms, my dear children. So you are given with a figure in here, several things that we use. Now I have explained why water is important for our life. Other than that, several day-to-day activities that we do in our life, right, by using water. So we use water in cooking purposes, for drinking, right, and to keep our body clean, for bathing, then to wash certain things, right, to wash certain things, my dear children, and to, in agriculture, like maintaining these farms, and my dear children, maintaining several kinds of fields, paddy fields and so on, right? So we have to utilize water. So these are several other instances that we utilize water, right, in our day-to-day life. Other than that, my dear children, there are different, large number of, right, there are large number of, right, things that we utilize water within our body without intentionally we are not using, like we don't know whether this thing is being used or not. However, our body utilize water in doing different other kinds of metabolic activities which is going to happen within our body. So I have explained those things to you guys previously. So we use water in very large extent in like vast kind of an area, right, in our life, my dear children. Okay, so water is a very important natural resource to us. So then let's head on to see the next one. So you are given with an assignment here. Make a list of some other uses of water that can add to the above diagram and present it creatively. So I hope that you guys have conducted the assignments in the previous chapters and in our previous lessons as well. So once again, now within this lesson also, you are given with a certain activity. So these activities are quite interesting and quite simple, my dear children, right? So you can do this at your home without any trouble, and also it will develop your creativity as well. So for our lives, those things are also very important, right? So as a science student, my dear children, it's very important to, right, have some amount of creativity within you guys. So therefore, I hope that you guys will follow up these things at your home and you will do these things. So what are the other things that we can use water in our day-to-day life? So in washing clothes and other different substances like vehicles and all the other stuff, we use water. Then to run our vehicle engines, to run our vehicle engines, we have to keep the engine cool. So in that case, we add water to the radiators, right? Because water has a certain property called the coolant property. It acts as a good coolant because it can absorb more amount of heat energy because of the high specific heat capacity. Specific heat capacity means the amount of heat energy which it can absorb, my dear children. So you'll be learning about these things when you go further with the grades, my dear children. But however, let me explain why water is going to absorb more amount of heat energy. Because the quantity called specific heat capacity, in simple, specific heat capacity means ability of absorbing heat energy. So if the specific heat capacity is high in a certain substance, then my dear children, it can absorb more amount of heat energy. So water is a certain substance which has high amount of specific heat capacity. So it can absorb more amount of heat. So that's why we can use water as a coolant. Okay, it can absorb heavy amount of heat energy. So in day-to-day life, right, we use water in cooling of vehicle engines, like the radiators, my dear children, and also in different machines we utilize water to cool down those things, right? And to put off fire we utilize water because of that high specific heat capacity. So like that way there are different uses of water. Okay, then one other use is that in making different substances, like in different chemicals and other kinds of substances. Now you know that in order to make a cement mixture also, right, we use water. So sometimes water acts as a good solvent, sometimes it act as a good binder, right, sometimes. And other than that, my dear children, right, when you take water, we use water, right, in making different kinds of, batteries and other objects. Here especially we use water in order to lower the strength of a certain liquid substance like an acid or in alcohol, right? To minimize the strength of those things, we add water. In science, we refer these things as diluting. So in diluting several liquids, we add water, right? Examples are acids and alcohol. Okay, so like I said, it can be used as a good solvent. So in making different kinds of solutions, we utilize water, right? So like that way, my dear children, there are we won't be able to number the amount of users that we get from water, right? So there are large number of users, right, when you consider water in our natural environment. Okay, so my dear children, I hope that you will find out these things and you will present these things in your classroom, and by that way you will collect even more information and even more users of water, right? So I hope that you guys will follow up these assignments and you will do it at your home or in your classroom. Okay, right then. So how water is used sustainably in the past? Now you know that when you take the distant past people, ancient people, they utilize water in a very good manner. That's why even in the upcountry, like in the dry zone, several kings created different kinds of tanks and other reservoirs in order to protect and conserve water, my dear children. Because in the dry zone, the rain is less, so they have to utilize the water quite well. So in utilizing these water resource, right, they have built up tanks and other reservoirs. Okay, so now we are going to find out how the ancient people used this water sustainably. Okay, so here it is given, natural way that the earth surface get water is the rain. So like I said, we receive water mainly as a precipitation from water, so from rain, my dear children. Okay, we receive water mainly as a precipitation from rain. So we receive water as rain to our for our day-to-day purposes. So water which is coming from rain, right, is getting collected within the streams and all the other water sources like canals, then streams, then waterfalls, then wells and all the other rivers and so on. Okay, so then we utilize this water in our day-to-day needs. So the main process which we receive water as a precipitation, right? Or else as a rain. Then, if rainwater is not properly used, it flows through rivers and streams up to the sea. It was the slogan of great King Parakramabahu that even a single drop of water should not be allowed to flow into sea without being used by man or animals. So you know that if we don't utilize, right, if you don't utilize water, rainwater, my dear children, in proper manner, if we don't conserve rainwater in proper manner, then what will happen? Definitely that rainwater will flow through rivers and all the other streams, and finally they end up with the sea, right? Finally they will end up meeting the sea. Means that the total rainwater is getting wasted now. Wasted means we are not going to utilize those things. So that's a terrible case in here. We have to use rainwater as much as possible, because you know that if you take the planet Earth, the consumable water in our planet Earth is only about 0.01%. So rainwater is one of that component. Okay, one of that component. I mean, like out of that 0.01%, rainwater is a component. So that means 99.99% is water which is not, or which cannot be used by us in our day-to-day activities. You know that most of the water in our environment is marine water, my dear children. So you know that marine water cannot be used for different purposes. Even for drinking, we won't be able to use that water, no. So therefore, my dear children, the consumable water is very less in our environment. So one resource that we receive consumable water is from rain. So conserving rainwater is very important, right? So that's why the great King Parakramabahu told that, right? Great king, he was a great king, right? Ancient king. So he told that we should never waste water, right? Or else we should never, right? We should never waste water, rainwater. We have to protect it. And he was given with a certain, he gave a certain slogan to the entire community that, like this, see, even a single drop of water, right? Even a single drop of water should not be allowed to flow into sea. Why does he say that? Because he knows the value of water, rainwater, right? So he's told that we should not allow to flow, right, this rainwater into sea without being used by any man or animal. Okay, so that's how the ancient people protected rainwater, conserved rainwater during their time. So a water tank can be introduced as a great creation of our ancient ancestors, used for conservation and sustainable use of water. I think, my dear children, you have learned about these things several times, right? When we are learning about different lessons, we came across with these things, right? So there are several rivers, right, in our Sri Lanka. So by creating a dam within a stream like river, right, a certain kind of a special reservoir is created. So this reservoir, which can collect water, is referred as the tank, or else in our terms, weber. So there are different tanks in our Sri Lanka associated with different reservoirs, right, associated with different reservoirs and rivers. So you know that there are several parts like, Bisoko Tour, the Sluice Gate, the canal, the outspill, then head wall, Ralapanam, and so on. So I think you already know what are the users and what are the beneficial things provided by each of these components in a weber or else in a tank. So construction of this weber or else the tank, right, introduced by ancient people in order to conserve water, in order to conserve rainwater, my dear children, because they knew the value that they receive from rainwater. Okay, so this is a wonderful creation of our ancestors, our ancient people. As you can see here, within the figure, you can observe the Parakrama Samudra, which is a main tank in our Sri Lanka, right? Okay then, so this is one way which ancient people protected rainwater or conserved rainwater for the next generation or for the future generation. Okay, right. Then you are given with a question, assignment. Find the special terms used for the components related to weather and make a report. Okay, so find special terms used for the components related to weather. So there are several components in a weather. Here, my dear children, I'm not going to mention, right, these things at all, because I think in several lessons we have discussed these things. Let me mention one lesson for you guys within the artificial environment and green concept. Within that lesson, my dear children, we have discussed about these components. Okay, we have discussed about these components. And within the lesson biodiversity, my dear children, in that case also we have discussed these parts, right? We have discussed these areas. So it's your responsibility, right, to find out these things, to find out this information related to a tank, right, and the components related to a tank. Then you have to make out a report by considering those parts and the function carried out by those things, my dear children. It's your responsibility, because I told you that even I have mentioned the lessons. So your responsibility, your very own responsibility. If you check this figure, right, the previous figure, you can clearly identify the components contained within the weather construction, right? Outspill, head wall, Ralapanawa, Bisokotua, tank bund, sluice, then the canal, right? So like that way, there are several components. So I hope that you guys will follow up this thing, and you will follow up the users or the benefits of each of these components. Okay, right then. So I'm not going to do this assignment, my dear children, because several times I told you about these things, and I hope that you guys have a sound knowledge about these things then. Okay, right. Then, my dear children, the second method of sustainable use of water. Let's see. If there is no air pollution, the purest water that we can receive is the rainwater. Now, if there is no air pollution, my dear children, the purest water that we can receive is the rainwater, right? Why it is mentioned as now air pollution? What is the relationship between the air pollution and the purity of water? See, once again, is it correct? If there is no air pollution, the purest water that we can receive is the rainwater. So what's the relationship between the purity of air and the purity of water? Actually, it has. When you take the precipitation rain, my dear children, when rain going to come down, you know that rain is water, no? So it has the ability to dissolve certain things in the atmosphere. So if there are toxic gases and other substances within the atmosphere, with water, that substances will get dissolved and will come down to the surface. So let's take sulfur dioxide gas. Now in the previous lessons, can you remember sulfur dioxide was considered as a greenhouse gas, no? And also it causes acid rains. So let's imagine that large amount of sulfur dioxide gas is getting collected within the atmosphere. So when water drops coming down, what will happen? Then, my dear children, sulfur dioxide gas will gradually dissolve within this rainwater and will come down to surface, which means sulfur dioxide is going to create now with water sulfuric acid. So that's how the acid rains are getting created. So for the purity of water, right, for the purity of rain, the purity of atmosphere is very important. If there are toxic and other poisonous substances which have been collected over the time within the atmosphere, then, my dear children, what will happen? The purity of water will definitely get affected. Okay, So it's very important, right? It's a very important factor, right? It's a very important factor. What factor? The purity of air, in order to get pure water from rain, my dear children. Okay, right? So now in Sri Lanka, as well as in some other countries, rainwater is collected to be used. Now most of the times, my dear children, in Sri Lanka, now we use rainwater. I mean, like, we collect rainwater, especially in the dry zone, my dear children, especially in the dry zone, right? Because they lack water. Within a certain year, they lack certain amount of water. That's why even the kings have built those kinds of what? Those kinds of tanks and other streams, right? So those things collected rainwater as much as they can, so that the people can utilize their water during the dry season. Okay, so if you go for the dry zone, my dear children, definitely you can observe these kinds of structures which created all around the house, which can be used to collect rainwater like this, right? So then we can purify this rainwater and we can utilize even for drinking, my dear children. Sometimes people in that dry zone utilize this rainwater, collected rainwater. Okay, so collection of rainwater is also another very good sustainable use, right? A brilliant sustainable use of water. Right then, so rainwater collection in domestic level is very important for the people in small islands like Maldives Islands, where there are no natural reservoirs. So my dear children, Sri Lanka is somewhat a bigger island, no? Right? When you compare with the islands like Maldives Islands. So Maldives Islands are like small islands are here and there like an archipelago, right? So when you take Maldives Islands, we won't be able to observe natural reservoirs, right? We won't be able to observe natural reservoirs. There are no rivers or any other natural reservoirs. So my dear children, it's quite difficult to get natural, I mean, like, fresh water within Maldives Islands. So within those islands, collection of rainwater is very important, because that's how they utilize fresh water within their day-to-day activities, my dear children. Okay, right, my dear children. So the collection of rainwater is another good sustainable use of water. Okay, right then. So you're given with a certain activity. Let's see what is that. Create a model to collect rainwater, right? Create a model to collect rainwater, right? So you are given with a figure in here actually. So you have to create a model like this to collect rainwater draining from the roof into a tank. Use the figure. Now what you have to do? You have to create a certain, right? You have to create a certain structure of a house. Within the structure, you have to, along the roof, right, at the edge of the roof, you have to create a certain structure so that it would collect rainwater, and the collected rainwater, right, through tubes, you can collect it to a different tanks, right, tanks or one tank like this given in the figure. So it's your responsibility to do this kind of to develop this kind of a model, right? It's very simple, my dear children. You just build up these things, right, by using different materials like paper, cardboard. You create the structure. Then by using small bit of pipes, you can use actually straws in here. So you cut a straw and you place that into the edge, and you can create the model quite easy. So I hope that you will do it at your home, my dear children, right? So this is how actually in our normal life also, this is how actually, my dear children, the rainwater is collected by using gutters and pipes, my dear children, right? Like this, we collect rainwater in our day-to-day life, but not most of the times in our wet zone. But however, when you go for the dry zones, in some houses, you can observe these structures. Okay, right? So I hope that you will do the activity to get some idea about the collection of rainwater, right? Okay then. So let's find out another way in using water sustainably, right? So here it is given, in dry zone, for the economical use of water in agriculture, clay pots filled with water are buried near the plants. Now within the figure you can observe. So clay pots, you know that there are small holes within clay pots. That's why when you touch the clay pot, you can feel some amount of wetness, right? It's because it has small bit of holes, and through it, some amount of water particles is getting, right, spreaded here and there, right? So in dry zone, my dear children, especially in dry zone, for the economical use of water in agriculture, clay pots filled with water are buried near the plants. So for the economical use, you know that if you water the plants, large amount of water is getting wasted at that case, no? If you water the plants, right, like by using a tube or any other, kind of a line, we are going to water the plant. So in that case, large amount of water is getting wasted, my dear children. So to overcome that situation, what the people do in dry zone is, they are going to bury like these kinds of, right, structures. Actually, these structures or these pots are made up with clay, right, made up with clay. So what they do is they fill water into these clay pots and they bury near the plants like this. Okay, now let's see what is the effect of that. So try this method in your home garden also. Scientists forecast that pure water will not be available for the people in the world in near future if recycling and reuse of water is not put into practice. So like I said, my dear children, when you put a clay pot like this, then water will gradually, it will diffuse into these plants with quite ease. So the necessary amount of water will be obtained by the plant, and if you put water by using a tube or any other, large amount of water is getting wasted, no? So in this case, my dear children, the wastage of water is plenty getting minimized. Only thing that you need to do is, when you check the water level in the clay pot, and you refill the clay pot with water. Very simple. So the clay pot has small holes, so therefore water will diffuse gradually into these plants without any trouble, and the necessary amount of water will be absorbed by the plant. The rest will be retained within the clay pot, my dear children. So which means, right, we can use very little amount of water for long time period to water the plants, like in the given picture here. If you water the plants by using any other method, then the wastage is going to be very high. So this is a very good sustainable practice in gardening, in agriculture. Okay, in order to water the plants, we can utilize this thing. So you are given, try this thing, right, at your home garden as well, right, near the plants, so that you can conserve water quite well. And the other thing is that, my dear children, scientists now, they are the ones who are doing certain researchers now. So they have done several researches, and they have found that in the near future, the consumable water is going to be even reduced, because at the moment, in present, people are utilizing water, right, than the expected amount. And the other thing is that we are not carrying out the recycle and the reuses process well. So therefore, scientists have predicted that within the near future, large amount of water is getting, because of the large amount of wastage of water, we won't be able to get pure water, right? So in that case, my dear children, it's going to be a very terrible issue, because without pure water, we won't be able to carry out our day-to-day activities, right? So it's going to be a huge problem within the near future. So it's our very own responsibility to protect the water as much as we can, to conserve water as much as we can, right? And to use water sustainably. Okay, right then. So I hope that you got the idea about the sustainable use of water. How does the people, right, the ancient people use sustainable methods of to conserve water, and how we can utilize these things in order to conserve water and in order to use water sustainably. Okay, right. Then, my dear children, you are given with another assignment in here. Let's see. Construct a poster or make a booklet including the steps that can be followed to use tap water in an economical way. So, how to use tap water in an economical way? Right? You know that in your school also there are different taps implemented in several locations. So, during the interval, what you do? You go there, you open the tap and you drink water. Then you sometimes close it. Sometimes it is not getting closed very well. Sometimes the water is getting leaked. Sometimes, my dear children, the by accident or by your own, sometimes some of you guys will try to, will break this thing. Okay. So, in that case, large amount of water is getting wasted now. So, like that way, the wastage is now, it's not only in the school or any other place, my dear children. For in each and every place we can observe these things, right? These are usual things actually that we can see in our day-to-day life, right? The wastage. So here it is given, when you take a certain tap, what are the steps that can be followed in order to minimize the wastage of water? You can do like this. Close in the tap, right, tightly, so that the water will not leak. That's quite important. That's the first and foremost thing, right? Then not open in the tap unnecessarily. Sometimes, my dear children, the tap is opened unnecessarily and you might wash your legs or any other, then you will close it and go. So it's not needed, no, right? Sometimes it's not needed. However, just by looking at the tap, you might think that you can open it, then I can wash my legs. Then going to wash your legs and come. Just now means actually now you are just thinking and you are doing it. Okay, actually it's not important, but however you are doing it, right? So it's not good for us. Not good for us, and as well as it's not good for the future generation as well. Why is that? Because you are wasting water in this case. So they will not have enough water in the future. Okay. So like that way, we should never open the tap unnecessarily. Right. That's another one. Then, my dear children, as soon as we have done the purpose, or as soon as we have accomplished whatever the thing that we want from water, we should have to definitely close the tap well. Okay. Then you can prepare good drainage systems so that the water will come and collect to a certain place, and from that place you can utilize that water to be put in a different, agricultural, to be put in different places like agricultural lands, right? And in gardens and so on, right? You can utilize this rainwater, right, to be used in different agricultural purposes. That is also a added benefit. Okay. Then keeping these drainages clean so that they will not block, right? And, my dear children, using proper taps and closing systems, right? That means valves. Then using proper tubes, conduits and other things. So these things are several steps which you can follow in order to minimize the wastage, right? Water wastage from these taps, my dear children. Okay. So I have mentioned several, right? So it's your responsibility to make out a certain report. So I'm guiding you in doing this activity. Okay. So I hope that you got the idea, my dear children. Okay. So within this chapter, my dear children, we got a brief introduction about the natural resources, and we identified what are the main types of natural resources in the environment. And also, my dear children, we got this idea about the first and foremost type of natural resource, which is water. And we identified what are the ways which we can conserve water, how the past people or the ancient people conserved water, and how we can utilize that knowledge in our day-to-day life or at our present to conserve water. Okay, so we discussed those things within the first lesson part over here, right? So with that, I'm going to finish up this chapter. So within our next chapter, my dear children, we'll be discussing the second most important natural resource of all, right? Another, like for the lesson, now we are learning about 4 different natural resources now. So first one is the water. Now we'll be learning about the second natural resource given in the lesson, right? But in our next chapter, that is rocks and minerals. So we'll learn about rocks and minerals in our next chapter then.
To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.